Welcome back to the Branding Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Praise Santos McKenna. I'm the founder of the branding studio Come Plum, based in San Francisco, California. And this is part of our special personal brand summit series. We talk a lot about branding and business, but we get a lot of questions and a lot of inquiries about what is a personal brand, what we do with our personal brand. So I decided to take some of the best experts in the world, people who want to share their knowledge about this subject, to come here on the podcast. And do I have someone great in store for you? Her name is Roz, and she is a personal brand building specialist. She's also a TED Talk speaker, author, and award-winning TV host. She is the best in the world at getting people out of their own way to help them be seen as the expert in their industry. Anyone can relate to that. So I love that this is her specialty, because Ross says that many authors, speakers, consultants, and entrepreneurs hire her to turn their expertise into profitable brands. That's why she's called the expert maker. No longer are people stuck trying to build a brand by themselves. We don't have to do this alone, people. Roz and her team of creative professionals, which includes videographers, photographers, graphic artists, animators, writers, and social media gurus, they help build personal brands from the ground up. She also has a television series, people, so it's called The Expert Maker TV, and it is a winner in the 43rd Annual Telly Awards. Roz has a background in the media industry. She's a former TV anchor, reporter, and producer for companies you might have heard of. CNN, CBS, NBC, and Fox. And we are so humbled to have her on the Branding Your Business podcast today and part of the Personal Brand Summit. Hi, Roz. How are you? Thank you so
Hello,
much for being
Praise.
with us today.
Thank you so much for including me in your summit. So I hope that the information that I share with you and your audience is helpful.
Well, we're going to dive into one of your specialties, which is about our personal story, how it relates to our brand story. Do you want maybe even to give us an example? I read a bit of your bio, but how do you differentiate that personal story and one's brand story? How do those two things relate together? How have you differentiated that even in your own life?
You know, I don't think you can have a brand story without a personal story. The majority of us, 99.9% of us entrepreneurs, come to what it is that we're going to do as a business from a personal place. We either have a calling to help a certain group of people, we have had an experience and have overcome it. So, therefore, there are solutions and resources that we've come up with that we indeed want to help others with. So, there's a story behind your brand story, and that story behind your brand story is you. That's the other thing that helps a brand become authentic. You asked me, how do I differentiate myself from other people who are doing this similar thing? It is the fact that I come from a different place. My personal experiences as a television reporter, as an interviewer, as a storyteller helps to differentiate what I do from others. And it helps the brand, the expert maker, be unique. There's no one else that can do it the way that I do it. Same with you. There's no one else that can do what you do the way that Praise does it. And your story is the biggest, it's the backbone to that.
100% agree, because I love that even our business models are somewhat similar, right? We help a lot of brands, we work with a team of creatives, but Roz has her special sauce. The people listening to the summit, they have their special sauce too. I love that you highlighted that a lot of us get into this work because we have a nudge or we had a calling to really want to help people, serve people, or solve a problem in a certain way. Because I know what we are talking about a lot during the summit. It's yes, about thought leadership, but it's also about thought service leadership or thought servant leadership,
Yes.
about serving people and wanting to help people, because people can tell when there's an authentic drive to want to do this thing that they're saying that they want to do. And then there's this drive, I can tell by your career, how you showed up today, that you really want to help people uncover their story. You want to really help people uncover their why and showcase that and how they share their stories. And that is a really good reminder to our listeners to be like, okay, let's tap into the authenticity of my experience and who I am. But I have to ask you, because you've been doing this for a number of years. I mean, you have your own TV show. How has your brand story crafted itself over time? Has it evolved every year or every season? And how have you kind of changed it so that our listeners can also understand, hey, we don't have to have just one brand story for the rest of our life? How do we
Okay.
remind them of the flexibility in our stories?
Well, you know what? For me, I have a lot of stories, and I think that's the other thing. You don't just have one story because if you've lived long enough, you have a lot of experiences, which means you have a lot of stories. And so it's not so much that my brand story has evolved. The business has evolved, the brand has evolved, but the story hasn't. There are just more of them. And then they just sort of get related to certain things in the business or how I use the stories. And if it's okay, can I say a couple of ways that people can utilize their story?
Please do.
A zillion ways. I think one, as a business owner, funding, because you've got to fund your business. If you're not self-funding your business, those dollars have to come from somewhere. So utilizing those personal stories can help you get funding. Grants, for instance, money that you don't have to pay back. A lot of those applications are looking for a personal story. What's the backstory? Who are you helping? Why are you helping them? When you add those kinds of personal stories to your applications, you start to stand out. Your stories, your brand story, or your story in general, can be utilized in signature talks that you give. They can be utilized in workshops that you give. Let me give you an example of a story that I just used um, to help people connect with me and to book an appointment. Can I just give you a little bit of a story?
Please.
So I'm in New York and I was going to an appointment, didn't want to be late, so I chose not to drive because you never know with New York City traffic. Let me take the subway, a little more reliable in terms of my time frame. So I go into the subway and there's two choices for me where I'm going in Brooklyn. There is a local train and there's an express train. So when I walk into the subway, I'm on the local track. I'm like, no, you know what? I'd rather take the express train. It'll get me there faster. And then the last tiny portion, which is only one stop, I'll switch over to the local. So I go down two flights of stairs. It's not the local and the express aren't on the same platform. I go down the two flights of stairs under the tracks. I walk through this long hallway up under the two flights of stairs to the express track. And I wait and I wait and I wait. And then I can see that the local train, is coming on the track that I left. So I thought about it for a moment. I'm like, no, I'll go get it. It'll be slower, but at least I'll be moving in the right direction. I'll be moving at least. So I run down the stairs because I can hear this train coming. I run down the two flights of stairs, through the hallway, up the first flight of stairs, the next one, and then the next one. And I get right to the door. And boop, the train doors close in my face with me on the outside of the train. And as luck would have it, I can hear the express train coming now from the track that I left. I'm a little winded, but I can make it. Back down the stairs. And you have to understand, I am running at top speed. For once, I'm not in heels, I'm in sneakers, so I'm prepared for this run. Through the hallway, up that first flight of stairs, and I can now see people coming out of the train. And I'm like, oh, and whoop, I missed the express train.
I'm aching. I am aching hearing this.
I'm so mad at myself. If I had just stayed still. So I've missed two trains, been on several tracks, but have not left the station. I'm in the same place, if you will. Different track, but same place. And it sort of reminded me that a lot of clients do this in their business. They'll go chasing after something. They'll chase after the next webinar, course, mastermind class, 5-day challenge, do it all, and then realize in the exact same place. They haven't moved. Well, I may not be great at taking the subway to where I need to go, but when it comes to business, I do know the next best step for someone. So I'm a great sounding board. Give me a call and let's at least chat about where you are and what you need to do next. So that's an example of me telling a personal story, one where I don't win, by the way, and relate it to something I want you to do as it relates to your business and as it relates to coming to me for assistance. So those kinds of stories can be utilized throughout your business to get people to book a call with you, to get them to sign up for one of your lead generators, whatever. Your story just can be used in so many ways. But I wanted to give you an example.
Yeah, this is so good because you gave us an example. Your brand story has stayed the same, the origin story, why you started, but you just have more stories, more life stories that you can choose from to interweave into different parts of the business. And you're such a good storyteller. Also, this is so fun that this is recorded on video because for those who are watching the video portion of this, you're seeing her, you know she's sitting down, but she running. She is running up and down there. Were you also a comedian in your past life, Roz? I'm kind of liking this. But I love that you told the story, you kind of came to a lesson and then you related it back. Can you break down how the humans listening to our summit, right? They are filled with stories. Some of them are going to say, I'm not a good storyteller. Roz was great. She was a journalist. How could I take stuff from my everyday life and relate it to a business? Can you share that framework that you so seamlessly did with your story? How could our listeners do the same with their stories?
Absolutely. Most stories come in three parts or three formulas. And if you don't use a formula, you can run on and never have a point and never get to the point. So I like to use a formula. One, what happened? Tell the story. What happened? Two, what did you discover? And then three, what is it that you want someone to do? So three is the call to action. If you take the stories that you have and put them into this format, you'll have a relatable story, which is really, really, really important. I think people can see themselves, and this is really important. When people can see themselves in your story, then you can connect or they can connect with you. Either they can see themselves where they are right now, or they can see themselves where they'd like to be. Those are the two really emotional portions of a story that helps people connect with you. And then, of
That
course, the
is
formula
huge.
one, two, three. What happened? What'd you learn or discover? What do you want somebody to do?
Doesn't have to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3. And when I think about someone reading through a stack of grant applications, when I think about someone reading through a stack of podcast applications, and they see a story to tell you what happened, maybe it might be a short story of how you started your business, what you've discovered, why you're doing what you do, and then a call to action of, I want to be on your podcast, or I want to use this grant to fulfill my mission. There are this three-step formula. It seems so simple, but I could see how you could adjust it to those different uses that you described to get
Right.
people to book a call with you. And I think that'll help people so much, give them the freedom to be like, wait, my stories matter. They can actually work in my business. And I do think, though, we have to acknowledge because a lot of people who are listening to the summit, some of them are just leaving their corporate jobs and starting to start on their own, or they've done that part and they're building their thought servant leadership, they're building their businesses, but some things still hold people back from sharing their stories. Maybe now that they have a formula, they can more easily share. But what are common things that often hold people back to sharing their story or not putting themselves out there? Have you seen a pattern?
Something that I see most often as the expert maker are people who don't realize that they have expertise. And I think even to start some storytelling, you have to examine your own life. You've got to find the stories. One of the things you talked about just a few minutes ago, and I meant to piggyback on them. You were talking about uncovering things. One of the things that people have to do, especially when they're like in this industry, um, is uncovering their genius, uncovering your expertise. I have found that people take for granted what it is they know. It's like, well, can everybody do this? Well, no, no, we can't. So those things that come naturally to you, those things that people call you and say, hey, can I pick your brain about this? What's that? When you figure out your thing, then you can then sit back and go, well, what are some stories around this thing that I do? So let me give you, for instance, I have clients who are personal organizers, and they came to become personal organizers because it came naturally to them. They knew how to put things in order. This should go here, this should go here, and there shouldn't be any clutter. Everything should have a home. And that's the way their brains work. That isn't necessarily the way everyone's brain works. And so once they have figured out this is my special sauce. What what makes this my special sauce? Once you figured out your special sauce, you have to then ask, why do I organize so easily? Well, because I know when I walk into a room, I think this. I think there's a lot going on here. What's the use for this room? Um, how can we get more space? Why doesn't that have a home when other people walk into a room and just see a room? So your stories come from you. And when you take the time to look for your stories, you'll find them. You will. So your question was, why doesn't it happen more often? I think it's because people don't take the time or recognize their value and their uniqueness. There is an assumption that everyone can do what you do, and that is far from the truth.
I'm getting goosebumps. I had to mute myself because sometimes I'm just like, yeah, Ross, like you tell them. People need to know that too. And that's so much of the heart behind our summit because I feel like there are so many people who are experts and have wisdom on topics that people want to know about. And we need to be that voice, that friend cheering them on. We're saying, hey, the world needs what you got. You might not think you're
Yes.
special, but I'm reflecting this back to you that not everyone thinks the way you do. You're a natural storyteller, Roz, but not everyone knew that 3-part formula. We needed you to share it. Those professional organizers, truly, we need to remind them they are a gift from heaven. We need you in the world. And the way that they think about a room, the way they think about a shelf, people need to know about that. And you said something so practical, and I don't want us to glaze over that. It's one self discovery, sitting back and think, okay, what's so special about me? But we also have community, friendships, colleagues who can give you that feedback. So it's also being able to do self-discovery and a little bit of research of asking that question that you said, what is something special about me? What is that thing that you think I'm an expert on that you'd like me to share? If they can even just start there to start honing in on their magic, honing in on that special thing that makes them them, and they can go as deep as they want to. Maybe it's two journalists, right? Maybe their careers seem similar, but there's something different. Maybe one asks really engaging questions and another one can really empathize or dig deeper into things, and they find out their special sauce, even though it might look the same from the outside. And so for our listeners here, maybe you're holding back from storytelling because you're like, I don't know if I have a unique perspective. I just want to take that thought and say, you do have a unique perspective. Roz and I are here to tell you you have that magic. It's just about taking the time to discover our own, to discover like that inner magic. And it sounds like you have been so good of teaching your clients that, which I want to kind of get into a personal question for you. Did you always know that you would be a good interviewer, a good journalist, a good storyteller? Did someone reflect that to you when you were younger? Or how did you discover your own magic? How did Roz discover the expert maker inside of her?
So, as far as becoming a journalist, no, no. I might have been a very good interviewer because as a child, I just could not stop asking questions. If things didn't make sense to me, I'm going to ask you about them. I remember being in Sunday school and Sunday school teachers not wanting me in their class because I would just question everything. So, I think I'm a born interviewer. As far as storytelling goes, that's something that I had to learn to do. That did not come naturally to me. And as a journalist, I had 90 seconds as a reporter to tell a story. You only get 90 seconds. And so my challenge when I started my own business and needed to reflect on the stories that I was able to tell, they had to be extended. It's like I can only do something in 90 seconds. So most people need to pare things back. I had the opposite problem. I needed to expound on things that did not come naturally to me because I had been trained to do something in a deadline in this amount of time, wrap it up. And my brand story, or the reason I started my business, I'll say it that way, was because I had several friends and colleagues that had expertise in different areas. So I had a friend who's still a good friend of mine, but she worked with children in terms of dance and movement from birth to 4 years old. That was a specialty. People don't usually work with children with movement and dance with children that young, but she was doing it, moving from school to school to school to school. And I happened at the time, I had a 2 year old and was part of an organization of mothers who were looking for something like this. And so I said to her, hey, if my small group of mothers in this particular area of the country are interested in this, would you think that people or moms around the country, probably around the world, would be interested in the specialty that you have? And she couldn't see it. She was like, what specialty? Like, you've been doing this for a decade. You've worked with thousands of children, and somehow you don't see the specialty in what you do? And she didn't. Same thing with a woman who was a hair care specialist. She was working with people who were losing their hair, and she had these techniques. And in 6 to 7 months, people were regrowing their hair. And I'm like, this is what you're doing. This is amazing. Clients that happen to just know about you and walk into your salon shouldn't be the only ones who benefit from this amazing expertise that you have. So when I realized that there were these people who I knew well who didn't see themselves as experts, I realized I had some work to do because that's my superpower, uncovering people's genius and then packaging it and turning it into a business. That's my superpower. I realized, okay, maybe I should recognize my own expertise and start a business doing this.
I love hearing entrepreneur story because it's often like this. They were already doing it, or someone was already highlighting that they're good at this too. And we all need a Roz in our life to reflect back. Even Roz needed herself in her life to be like, Roz, you
Roz
should
needed
turn
the
this,
expert maker.
Roz, you should turn this into a business. It's
It's
pretty good.
true. And you know what? As you say that, let me just give four. This is in my TED Talk. So let me give 4 ways to uncover your own genius, if that's
Yes,
okay with you.
we need this.
So ask yourself, what are my natural talents? What's that thing that I can do so easily that I can't figure out why other people can't do it as quickly and as seamlessly as I do? 2, when someone calls to pick your brain, what do they want to know? What are they asking you about? Check with a colleague, some friends, and ask, hey, what do you think my expertise is? What am I good at? And sometimes it really is very helpful to ask someone outside of yourself because people are going to see you differently than you see yourself. And then question number 4, what have you overcome? What's that thing that had you stumped that you needed to find solutions for, find resources for, get questions answered for? That thing that you've overcome, that you can indeed help someone else to overcome. Those are 4 of the many ways or the many questions that you can ask yourself to help uncover your expertise or uncover your genius, as I like to call it.
And Roz is doing a really great job of also showcasing as you build your expertise, whatever it is in, you start having these frameworks of thinking, of breaking down a big thing. We're talking about a big topic of sharing our story or uncovering that thing that makes us really special. Some people, when they get asked that question, kind of get hit in the gut. Like, I need to go away on a 7-day silent retreat to figure this out. And Roz is like, nah, I got you. Just ask yourself these 4 questions. Think about the story in 3 ways. And this is such a good example of you start developing your expertise by I've overcome this myself and I've simplified it in these ways. And this is also why I'm so glad to have you on here as we're sharing about storytelling, because there's so many benefits to sharing our story. There's so many benefits to having a succinct bio, to having a succinct origin story, to having a library of stories that we can relate to people to help simplify a intangible idea and make it more solid. You touch on one of the benefits being like an emotional connection or like a human connection with people when we share our stories. What are the other benefits for people once they've discovered their magic and their genius? Once they know now your 3-part framework of how to tell a story, continue to sell us, Roz. Like, what are the pros about this is why we need to practice this muscle of storytelling? Here are the benefits of it.
One, I think we talked about built an emotional connection. Two, increases understanding because you're able to break something down and explain it. It increases your credibility. And it also builds trust. When someone can resonate with you and resonate with your story, there is a portion of trust that is already built inherent. We talked about your brand identity. This strengthens your brand identity. It's going to foster relatability, improve your persuasion, right? Help those stories, like the story that I told about the subway run, helps you to just sort of think, wait, I get stuck like that in my business, or right now I'm stuck and I'm not sure what to do next. And that story helps people to go, she can relate to what I'm talking about. I think it differentiates you from your competitors. That's a big thing that Praise and I are talking about a lot. Boosts your engagement and I think creates lasting impact or a lasting impression. I suspect many of your listeners will remember my story before they remember my name. It's like, that's the lady that told that story about running through the subway, right? And that's what happens. Stories do that. I have been in places where I'll see someone and remember a story they told me and can't remember their name, their face, nothing about them, but it's like, that's the lady that, oh, what's that thing she told me? That. Yeah. And actually, that helps me reintroduce myself to them because I'll walk up and go, I remember you telling me the story of da 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 da. And then I will be authentic. I'm like, I don't remember your name, but I remember the story. What's your name again? So I think stories just help humanize us and it helps people to connect with you, your product, and your service and what you offer.
100%. I feel like folks will be listening to this podcast, be part of the summit, and they're like, that running woman, I need her help. Running Roz, that was her name. Roz, hopefully that's a mnemonic to help you all remember. But I love that because we're helping people build personal brands because often they are the brand ambassadors of their business. And we want to see more people with thriving businesses, businesses that help the world. And this is, again, we are about serving people and thought servant leadership. And I also want our listeners to also serve themselves and have great lives for themselves and their families and their businesses to thrive. And so this is part of our marketing funnel, right? Like know, like, and trust. They need to know you, they need to like you. And these stories build that connection, they build that trust. Roz is like me. Roz misses trains too, right? And then it creates that lasting impression. And I love that connection you can make by just telling a good story. I love the way you can set yourself apart when you're getting funding for your business by telling a good story. For us in the Personal Brand Summit, we're really giving people an actionable takeaway from listening to all the episodes within the summit. And that's their 1-pager media kit, because I know that we get often a lot of pitches to the podcast. I know they're pitching themselves to journalists and press. And we kind of need one thing that has a short bio there. Can you tell us really practically, how do we take your three-part framework and take this big brand and origin story and really start to interpret it for different mediums, whether it is for a media kit, whether they are introducing themselves at their own TED Talk. Is there a way that we can take our story and interpret it for the different mediums that we need to connect with people?
And I talked a little bit about these first three, which was applying for funding, and that might be funding from investors. It might mean banks or partners. Telling your brand story, telling your personal story behind that. Applying for grants. You just talked about that and in your signature talk. So if you're invited to speak as a keynote speaker and you're going to do 45-minute talk, you better have some stories in there because people will not remember what it is that you wanted to talk about or what it is that you wanted to leave that lasting impression. You've got to have some personal stories in there. Social media posts, definitely. Your about page on your website certainly should have your brand story, your personal stories. Pitching to the media, as Praise was just talking about. I am on this podcast with Praise because I sent her a story with a pitch that said, "Hey, I talked to an audience like yours. Would you be interested in having me on the show?" And that's why that's why I'm sitting here with Praise now. In client sales conversion calls, you can utilize your stories to help get them to resonate with you and to convert them into your business. In newsletters, on your blog, in podcast interviews like I've used today. So there are so many different ways that you can utilize your story. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, you're just saying hello. It comes up in so many places. We need to be able to like know our story well so that we can reinterpret it of, okay, I'm live on a podcast. I can talk about this, or I'm doing keynote speaking. I can talk about this, or Roz had a bit of her story in the email that she sent me too. She had a short blurb. She can copy and paste in there and tell me this is why it relates to your audience too. There are so many ways that it benefits us to have our stories, to adapt it to different mediums, and it's just about tweaking it, making it a little longer, making it a little shorter as appropriate to the medium. And you were so funny, Roz, because you're like, I knew how to tell a story in 90 seconds. It was only when I started my business that people were like, we want your story to be longer. It's a 45-minute talk. And it sounds like you're like, okay, I'm going to adjust and maybe tell more details, tell more setup.
Right.
And you learn
There's gonna have to be a couple of stories.
exactly. I need to string multiple stories together. And this is so helpful just because some people think it's a one and done formula, right? Like we craft our authentic brand stories in one way. But you sharing and giving us these different frameworks and examples is giving us the freedom to be like, hey, this is a muscle we practice to use our story in different ways over time and to add to our library of stories over time. And this will help us grow our thought leadership and build our business. I feel like this is so helpful. And we can still use that three-part formula, huh? What happened?
Absolutely.
What did we discover? And then we adjust that call to action for every different medium.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got it. There you go. It's a simple three-part formula. They adjust it a little bit here and there. What happened is always pretty much going to stay the same. What you learned, what you discovered, what you realized, that may shift a little bit depending on the story. And then, of course, your call to action. What is it that you want someone to do? Sign up for my newsletter, come to my live workshop, book a call, come to my live event, whatever that is, buy my book. Who knows what your call to action is, but that may adjust, of course, depending on who you're telling the story to.
100%.
And there's so many different audiences there's lots of audiences that want to hear your story.
I
And let me just say this also while it's on my mind, because if I don't say it, not only in business, well, in your personal life, I know stories of people who have purchased homes when there were multiple offers. But along with the offer, they sent their realtor to the homeowner and said, "Here's a letter. Would you tell them when you give my offer, would you also tell them that I have three little children and we love the swing in the backyard, and that little place that had the window seat, I can see myself reading a story to my children at bedtime." See, people will take an offer that is less money when it comes with a story like that, especially if they've been in a home for a long time and they've raised their own family there. Stories are so important both in your business and in your personal life.
That emotional connection is what can set you apart, right? Whether you're making an offer on the house or you're trying to grow your list of clientele, tell
Yes.
more stories. This is what I'm taking away. Tell more stories. Well, Roz, running Roz, so people remember your name, Roz, the expert maker. So many people are going to want to connect with you. So I want you to follow your own example and give some calls to action. How can people find you online? I know you have a few free resources you want to share. We'll also put them in the show notes and on the Facebook group. But what are some ways people can connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Roz Miller Choice, Roz the Expert Maker. I'm also on Instagram, Roz the Expert Maker. And I want to offer your audience a book, a PDF that I put together, which is called Build Your Brand in 30 Days or Less. And I take my experiences from my days in television of, you know, the media are the brand builders. Earnestly, they're top of the line when it comes to building brands. And so I take three projects from television and teach you how to utilize them in your own business to help build your brand. So that guide is available as well. And I'm hoping that Praise will supply the link for you.
We'll definitely be sharing the link and we'll also be sharing. We have a deck to go along with this. I know we talked about a few different frameworks about thinking about your story. So if you all are more PDF people and you need something after this recording to work on your own brand story, we'll be sharing that too. So a lot of resources available. Roz, thank you for being such a great example of what it is to be a thought servant leader, to take your experiences and really use your giftings, your genius, and your magic to help others uncover their own giftings and genius and magic. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sending me that email that asked to be on the show. And I was like, wait, she's the perfect fit for the Personal Brand Summit. So I'm glad you took that risk and our
Oh,
stories could connect. I'm so glad you're here.
and I am grateful to you, Praise. You're doing an amazing job. Love your platform. This has been fun. I'm a much better interviewer than I am an interviewee, but you've made this lovely. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Roz.